my name is Linda Hermany. I would just want to tell you a little bit about my story. It's a long story, but I'm going to just give you little bits and pieces. And I just want to say overall, I feel like I'm just simply blessed. I actually have a t-shirt that says that because that's exactly how I feel. The Lord has taken good care of me and my family for our years together, and so I say I'm simply blessed. I'm going to start at the beginning when I was born in Fort Smith, Arkansas on September 7th, 1938. Now that's a long time, so yes, I'm 86 years old. I was born into a Christian family, and that in itself is a blessing. I was baptized on November 23rd, and my family, as I said, was a Christian family, and we went to church every Sunday. Every time the church doors were open, we were there. We went to First Lutheran Church, which is a beautiful historic church in Fort Smith. Now, I said it was a Christian family, and like all families, we weren't perfect. We had our ups and downs like anyone else. I have one sister who is 13 months older than I am. I went to First Lutheran School in Fort Smith for 9 years, and then I went to our public high school. When I was in high school, I would help out at church for VBS, and during that time, the principal of the school would say to me, Linda, you, I think, would be a great teacher. So maybe you need to consider being a Lutheran school teacher. Would you think about going to Concordia, to one of the Concordias, and getting your teaching degree? So that's exactly what I did. I went to Concordia River Forest in 1956. It's a beautiful campus outside of Chicago. It was quiet and peaceful, even though, and we had only about, I would think, 850 students. So you got to know a lot of people, and from day one, I enjoyed it. But at Concordia, I also met a young man named Bob. Actually, I met him in our sophomore year, and I thought, oh, he looks like a really nice guy. So he always told the story how, well, Linda asked me out first, and I did because we had a reverse weekend, and I said, would you like to be my partner for reverse weekend? And thankfully he said yes, and so we got to know each other better. We were from typical families, I mean, just generally hardworking families. And at that time in life, after the Second World War, while he and I were growing up, you know, people watched their pennies. They didn't spend money unless they had it to spend. I can remember Bob's dad saying, we don't buy anything unless we can pay for it. So that was kind of the era that he and I were from. Anyway, we got to know each other, and soon it became a love story, and when we graduated, we got married in September after our June graduation. And so we knew that we were going to be sent someplace who had asked for Lutheran school teachers. So we were interviewed, and they decided that Bob and I, since we were going to be married, should be sent to Providence, Rhode Island. Well, Providence, Rhode Island was far from Arkansas. I knew nothing about it. My family had traveled a little bit, but not that much. So this was totally new to me, and it was totally new to Bob. But we were married on August 6th, and we needed to be in Rhode Island on August 15th. So really, that was our honeymoon, to drive from Arkansas to Rhode Island. Well, Providence is an old town. The funny part was we had talked about, now what kind of an apartment will we look for when we get there? Because we had no furniture. We just had our clothing and probably wedding gifts in the car with us. And when we got to Rhode Island, we found out, well, they're not really apartments like we think of apartments. So we found what they called a flat in a large home. And 6 weeks later, we moved. You're going to hear a lot about moving in my story. So here we are, settled in. We are new teachers. We are newly married. We're living in a new location. We had a lot to learn. But the people in the church, it was St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Providence, Rhode Island on Elmwood Avenue. And they were very receptive to us, very kind and helpful. I was assigned to teach 3rd and 4th grade, and Bob taught 5th and 6th grade. And at that time, when you were a Lutheran school teacher, you were called to be a teacher and have another job at the congregation. So Bob's job was to also be the youth counselor, and my job, I found out, was to help start a handbell choir. So we're in an apartment, we're teaching every day, we're enjoying it, and it's time to move again. And that was in the first year, because then we found a 2-story flat that was being built that was brand new on a little lake, and we had the upstairs to ourselves, and by then we could afford to buy our own furniture. So we were good to go, and once again, we were blessed by the Lord. He was taking very good care of us. So life was busy, and about 3 years into our life there, we happily welcomed Jonathan. And so that was exciting for us, and I continued to teach. By then I had switched to kindergarten because it was half day. But we were in Rhode Island 5 years, and Melinda was born just before we left Rhode Island. So our next call was to Baltimore. Bob had received a call to be a teacher in the junior high, and we went to Baltimore. So our move there was into a row house, which was very interesting. In fact, then during that move, we also found out we were expecting a baby again. And that was Kristen, who was born in, let me get my dates, 66. So Jonathan was 63, Melinda was 64, Kristen was 66. The 3 of them are just about exactly a year and a half apart. By that time, I wasn't teaching anymore. I was a full-time mom living in the row house. And that was pleasant and enjoyable. We lived in the row house for 1 year. Remember, I told you there was going to be a lot of moving. And the next year, we found what the people in Baltimore called a semi-detached. That was like 2 houses together. So we thought that was a step up. It was a better location for the 3 children. But we were only in Baltimore for 2 years when Bob accepted a call to Richmond, Virginia, moving again. But before I forgot, so when we moved to Richmond, I would say the children were probably about 4, 2.5, and 1. And I just had to bring a picture along that I had on the wall. This is the picture of the 3 of them. And I want to tell you a little story about what they would do. You know, we were busy. Bob was busy with his job. I was busy being a stay-at-home mom to 3 little ones. And the only place we really went all the time was to church. So that's what the children knew. They knew church. And this is one thing that they would do that I thought, I will treasure this forever, even though I thought I had a picture of it and I can't find the picture. But the girls would get some old hats that I had. We used to wear, the pillbox hat. And so they'd put a pillbox hat on their head, They probably would get some of my gloves and put them on. Jonathan would get the Bible, and they would sit on the stairs going to our upstairs to our bedrooms, and they would play church. I mean, Jonathan preached and the girls sang. I'm sure they all sang. But that was such a treasure. They were about this age. That's what they knew, was dressing up and going to church. And so that was one thing they played. We were in Richmond at several churches because also during that time, after Bob had been a principal for a few years at Luther Memorial, he decided that he would like to pursue a degree in counseling, so he started taking courses at night, and he wanted to find a counseling position because that's what he thought he would be comfortable doing. So there were no counseling positions in Lutheran schools, so at that time he switched to public education, and he was real excited to get started. In fact, he said, I can remember he came home one day from his job so excited because he said, I think I know all of the children's names that I'm responsible for. I think it was either 7th or 8th grade, and he was really excited about knowing everybody's name because he thought that was a very personal thing to do. So he's working there, and sometime in that time frame when the children started to school and we moved to an apartment because we moved locations in Richmond and we needed to be, actually we were in the southern part of Richmond in one of the counties, and the children were starting to school. We lived in an apartment. Kristen was 1 year away from starting kindergarten, so she stayed with the local pastor and his wife and their one daughter during the daytime, and those two girls were about the same age, so that was a perfect setting. Again, the Lord blessed us because that was when I went back to teaching. I filled out the year for a teacher, and then the next year I started back into full-time teaching also in the public school. We didn't do any more moving there until we decided that we could buy our first house. And we bought our first house in a sweet little addition. The name of the street was Inspiration Drive, so we were inspired to plant around that house. We fixed up a jungle gym for the kids every year, whether we were in Providence or whether we were in Baltimore. We took our summer vacation to drive to Arkansas to visit my parents. And the more we came, the more Bob and then the children, as they grew up, said, we like it here in Arkansas. This is a fun place. The children left Creekmore Park in Fort Smith. We drove home, and the discussion got serious between Bob and me and the children. So we thought, let's see if we can do this. Let's see if we can move to Arkansas. So when we got home, Bob somehow knew a realtor, and the realtor had said to him, I could sell your house for you. Well, we'd only been there 2 years. We hadn't thought about selling it until we thought about moving to Arkansas. So we invited the realtor over, listed our house, and Bob and Jonathan, who had just been home a few days, said, okay, we're going to get back in we had a little VW and another car at that time. We're going to take the VW and we're going to drive back to Arkansas. And this is Bob talking, I'm going to go to the Fort Smith Department of Education and see if I can find us a job. So the arrangement was Bob and Jonathan left on a Saturday, and he was going to call me Monday. So he called Monday night and said, well, Linda, I got us both a job at the schools two different schools in Fort Smith. I said, well, I sold the house, so I guess we're ready to move. So here we were. Remember I told you we moved a lot, so we're moving to Arkansas this time. And, we did the usual stuff to get ready to pack up and all that. So we're on our way to Arkansas, probably down Interstate Highway 81, but we had to get off to get gas. I remember one time particularly, someplace in Tennessee, in the mountains of Tennessee, in a small town. And Bob pulled into a gas station to fill up, got out and walked around the truck and noticed that one of the tires on the truck was very low and close to being flat, I guess. And all our earthly possessions were in there. And so he said, well, we're going to have to take care of this before we can be on the road any farther. So he walked into the gas station and, talked to them about it and said that, he had a U-Haul trailer out there and he needed some help. And two men walked up. They were from U-Haul. And they said they were officials with U-Haul. I guess they were checking out different things. And they said, don't worry, we'll take care of you. We'll have that flat fixed in no time and you can be on your way. Now, that was a blessing from God. And I'm just giving you little tidbits of instances to tell you that we were constantly being blessed by God. We knew him as our Savior, and he was going to take care of us. And at that time, and still today, my favorite Bible passage always has been Romans 8:28. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And you can tell it's an emotional thing for me because that's what God has done. He has taken care of us all our lives, and he takes care of each of us. He knows what we need, and we can trust in him to be our Savior and our friend. So, back in the truck, it's fixed, and we were on our way to Arkansas. By that time, that was my dad had gone to heaven in 1972, so my mom was alone, so we stopped. Even though her house was a small little house, we stayed with her at first until we could find a place to live. Actually, Bob had found a place when he and Jonathan were there, but the apartment was not available because the man was ill, and they asked if we would find a new place. So that was part of our new searching. Going to new meetings for our new jobs in Arkansas, because we got there close to the time when it was about time for school to start. So we got settled in, let's just say that. And not too long, I think within the first year, we found a brand new home that we could buy in Fort Smith. So now life is really busy. Our children are all in school. They're busy in activities. Bob and I each have our job, but we're enjoying life in Fort Smith, so that's where we were settled in. And actually, we stayed in that area for quite some time and didn't do too much moving, except we did some more moving. From our house in Fort Smith, it was in a cul-de-sac, and that was the time for bicycle riding and finding friends who lived in the neighborhood, and the children loved it. But it was time for Jonathan to go to high school, and they had been going to school at our Lutheran school with our church, First Lutheran School, and we thought about there were two high schools in Fort Smith at that time, and we sort of talked about, would you like to go to one of those two high schools, or would you like to go find a smaller school? And we had relatives who lived out in the country, and some of their children went to a smaller high school in Greenwood. And so we visited around and talked to the children about it, because obviously if Jonathan was going there, the girls would be going there too. So we, as a family, decided that that would be a good place. So we moved to Greenwood so the children could go to school. And eventually, from my job in Fort Smith, I moved my teaching job to Greenwood also, and I ended up teaching kindergarten, which I absolutely loved, for 20 more years. Then it was time for the children, of course, to be in college, and Bob and I retired, not before they went to college, trust me, but after college was over and our years were spent in education. Bob actually spent 40 years in education, and I spent 35. And we decided after we retired that we would move. We had land in Hot Springs Village, and we decided to buy a different lot on a pleasant golf course, and we built a new house, and that was lots of fun too. By now, our children are grown. Melinda's married, Jonathan's working, Kristen's married, and God is still blessing us each day. Now, I'm not trying to say that we never had incidents or things to settle, or wait a minute, let's think about that. But we could feel God being with us. So Bob and I are by ourselves in Hot Springs Village. Melinda and Gerald were in, and their family, and babies were in Marion while he was doing work in Memphis. And Jonathan was living in Little Rock. Our younger daughter, Kristen, had been in Texas, but she had also moved back to the Little Rock area. Our house in Hot Springs Village had a beautiful front porch set back from the street, 2 rocking chairs. That was one of Bob's favorite places. And, you know, we would get out and walk the neighborhood and learn all the people who lived there, so that we, you know, could talk and visit with them. So we are in Hot Springs, and we are doing well, and we are loving it. But the children in Little Rock are saying to us, we know you're close, but you're not quite close enough. So when we would come up to visit, we decided that maybe it would help if we came up here to church on Sundays. That way we could see our family and go to church at the same time. And usually after we had spent part of the day here, maybe before our way home, we might look around at some of the areas to live in Little Rock. And that took a while. We probably did that for 1 or 2 years. And then finally we decided, you know, it really would be helpful. We're getting older. It would be helpful if we probably moved to Little Rock. We had about 3 offers, and we took one that was very quick, and we had a short time, less than a month, to get ready to move. But we accomplished that and figured out what we would do, since we didn't really have a home decision made in Little Rock. But that happened too, and God bless that situation. So now I'm at home on Pride Valley Road, and if you ever go to Costco up Pride Valley Road, stop and see me. I'm one of 2 houses with a front porch. I have 2 rocking chairs. I love to talk to people and hear their stories. Something that's very important, besides being regular in church work, encouraging your children, and talking to the Lord daily and reading the Bible, I think is having Bible verses that you can hang on to for your situation in life. And I remember one that Bob and I would use almost every morning, which said, "Satisfy us in the morning with your unfailing love, that we may sing for joy and be glad all the days of our life." You know, that just kind of sums up what the Lord has done for us. And sometimes I do wake up in the middle of the night and it's hard to go back to sleep. I think about a lot of things. So what I have been doing is, as I wake up and I can't go back to sleep, I sing every hymn I know. Now, I don't sing them out loud, just in my head I think, I am trusting you, Lord Jesus. Or I might sing, oh, for 1,000 tongues to sing, or joyful, joyful, we adore you. I just sing every song I can think of to help me get back to sleep. But one day, as I was doing my Bible study, I came across, this was Psalm 4, verse 8, and it says, in peace I will lie down and sleep, for you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety. Now, that is just a trusting promise. I'm saying to God, I know I can lie peacefully and sleep because I'm in your hands, Lord. Be sure that you encourage your children, because you know we're supposed to be spreading the gospel. That's one thing we're supposed to do, and the Bible says, talk to your children. The passages in the Old Testament where the people were told to talk about them as you're lying down or as you're walking along the road. So encouraging your children in their walk with Jesus is very important. I said my whole life I have remembered Romans 8:28, because God promises us that we need to trust him, and if we trust him, he will see us through whatever it is. And we all have storms in life at different times and different kinds of storms. I started off at the very beginning telling you that my family was Christian, but we weren't perfect. And that's true. There were storms in life that I went through as a young child. And actually I carried them with me for a long time. But eventually I realized that that was part of God's lesson for me. In my future life, what I experienced as a young child helped me in my future life.